So great you could be with us again. I am joined by Greg Engert, beer director for the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, a food and wine sommelier of the year. The group includes Sovereign in Georgetown. Then in Penn Quarter, you've got the Partisan, connected right next door to Red Apron, and there's a million of those Red Aprons everywhere. Check them out when you see them. Greg, it is always good to see you.
You too, buddy.
What is on tap this week?
This week we have a very, very special beer from a very special brewery. The brewery is Jester King.
Oh, yes.
From the Texas Hill Country right outside of Austin. And the beer is Detritivore, which is one of their most celebrated beers. It is a mixed fermentation beer, about 5.5%, that has been matured on cherries, very special cherries. Let's take a sip and then I'll tell you more.
Oh, wow.
Delicious beer.
Oh, wow.
Really light, refreshing, airy.
Great balance.
Tons of balance, subtle fruit flavors without being overwhelming. So they make a beer called Montmorency versus Balaton, which, as the name suggests, utilizes both the Montmorency and the Balaton cherry. It's one of their most highly regarded beers, probably next to Atrial Rubicite, which is a beer they make with raspberries. And this is a beer that is aged on those cherries directly. And so it picks up a ton of flavor, a ton of color, lots of character. But what Jester King does in the name of sustainability is once they've made that beer and pulled the beer off of the fruit, there's still a lot of flavor in that fruit. So they'll then put a new beer on the fruit, kind of for the second runnings, and create something called Detritivore. So it's like a more subtle, maybe a more nuanced version of Montmorency versus Balaton. And this is something they do with a lot of their beers. Like for Atrial Rubicite, the beer they make with raspberries, they do a second beer that's lighter called La Vie en Rosé, which is also really delicious. But really cool.
What does this ring in at?
5.5%.
Okay.
And the two different cherries are really important. So Montmorency is an old French varietal that's been grown in Michigan for many, many years. Tart cherry, kind of pinkish color it lends to the beer. But then they also use Balaton, which is a newer varietal from Hungary that's like really rich, dark, sweet, and sour. And so you get a really cool complexity from the use of both of these types of cherries.
Now, I've been to Houston, and I've been to San Antonio, and I've enjoyed my visits to Texas very much each time. Just not sort of the sort of beer you think of when Texas comes to mind. And I'm not saying what beer I think does come to mind, but Jester King is amazing, and you just did an event with them recently.
Yeah, totally. I think to your point about not being a beer that comes to mind, it's a great point. What Jester King does, and what a number of other breweries, not a lot, but some other breweries do, is these guys they're farmers. I mean, they literally took over a farm outside of Austin, started making beer in 2010. By 2013, they were only fermenting their beer with naturally occurring yeasts. And then they started in 16 doing spontaneous fermentations. They've always used well water. They use ambient temperature. So they've been saying, like, from the beginning, really, we're going to make beer that is tied to this land. And then they started using local ingredients. And then they started growing their own ingredients. I think they did their first crop of melon that they used in beer back in 2017. It's really cool. But you know, Jester King has been doing it, and they're expanding out there. So like I would say that Jester King is one of the most beautiful places to drink a beer around, because you go out there, it's bucolic, it stretches out. They bought almost 60 acres around their property recently to protect and sustain and keep growing things, and they now have their own restaurant there that uses a lot of food that's grown on the farm, a lot of fermented foods. They have 4 different bars. I mean, it's just really great. They serve amazing wine, great cider, guest beers, their own beers. It's a must-see and must-drink place for American craft.
And I don't know, this good dry rub ribs. I don't know, what would you pair this with?
This might be a little bit light for ribs.
A little bit light.
They might be like a little big for this. But if you did like, if you went to North Carolina barbecue with some like pulled pork, maybe with the acidic sauce might work. But yeah, I mean, pork is great with this. Anything salty is going to balance against acid, and that little bit of cherry is going to liven it up. So I think like pork belly, maybe some sweet corn would be great with this because it's summertime. Duck confit, amazing with this beer as well. Creamy cheeses like chèvre or brie or camembert, also going to be really tasty with this beer.
Dynamite. Greg, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Everyone, please always do drink responsibly and be sure to bring your thirst next time for another beer of the week.